Welcome to Some TV Movie Channel, your home for amazing movies and non-stop entertainment. Get ready to enjoy blockbuster hits, timeless classics, and exciting stories from every genre. Whether you love action, drama, comedy, or adventure, there's always something to watch here. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the latest uploads. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the movie experience with Some TV Movie Channel. Today, we're diving into Die Hard 2, 1990, one of the greatest action sequels ever made. Set on a freezing Christmas Eve, the film once again follows legendary New York cop John McClane, who expects nothing more than to pick up his wife from the airport. Instead, he finds himself caught in another deadly terrorist plot, with hundreds of innocent lives hanging in the balance high above the ground. Starring Bruce Willis, Bonnie Bedelia, and William Sadler, this explosive thriller delivers non-stop suspense, intense shootouts, and unforgettable action sequences that helped cement John McClane as one of Hollywood's greatest action heroes. So, let's jump straight into the story. The movie opens 2 years after the events of the Nakatomi Plaza incident. It's Christmas Eve once again, and John McClane arrives at Washington Dulles International Airport to welcome his wife, Holly, whose flight from Los Angeles is expected to land later that evening. Although John has become famous for stopping the terrorists in Los Angeles, he still sees himself as nothing more than an ordinary police officer trying to spend the holidays with his family. Carrying a teddy bear as a Christmas gift, he patiently waits inside the crowded terminal while thousands of travelers hurry through the airport, completely unaware that one of the deadliest nights in aviation history is about to begin. Meanwhile, several mysterious men quietly arrive at the airport from different directions. They look calm and ordinary, blending effortlessly into the busy Christmas crowds. One man casually walks through the terminal carrying expensive military equipment concealed inside ordinary luggage, while others secretly gather around abandoned maintenance buildings far from the public areas. Their movements are precise, disciplined, and perfectly coordinated, suggesting that they are highly trained professionals rather than ordinary criminals. Unknown to everyone inside the airport, these men are part of a dangerous military operation that has been planned for months. At the same time, deep inside the airport's restricted communication center, air traffic controllers continue managing dozens of incoming flights despite the worsening winter weather. Heavy snow covers the runways, while visibility continues to drop, forcing pilots to rely almost entirely on the airport's navigation systems. The controllers remain confident because the airport is equipped with advanced radar and landing technology designed to guide aircraft safely through dangerous conditions. However, they have no idea that these very systems are about to become the terrorists' primary target. Elsewhere, a military transport aircraft secretly approaches American airspace carrying General Ramon Esperanza, a powerful foreign dictator being extradited to the United States to face serious criminal charges. Esperanza is considered one of the world's most dangerous military leaders, responsible for countless deaths through his involvement in international drug trafficking and violent military operations. His arrival has been kept strictly confidential because intelligence agencies fear that someone may attempt to rescue him before he reaches prison. What the authorities don't know is that an elite group of former military commandos has already begun carrying out exactly that rescue mission. Back inside the terminal, John notices a suspicious man carrying unusually heavy luggage while behaving nervously. Years of police experience immediately tell him that something is wrong. Curious, John quietly follows the stranger through several sections of the airport until the man suddenly enters a restricted baggage handling area. When John attempts to question him, the suspect attacks without hesitation. A brutal hand-to-hand fight erupts inside the dark luggage storage rooms as conveyor belts continue moving around them. The stranger proves to be highly trained, using advanced combat techniques far beyond those of an ordinary criminal. Although John eventually manages to kill him after an intense struggle, he is shocked to discover that the man was carrying sophisticated military weapons instead of ordinary luggage. John quickly reports the incident to airport police, believing he has uncovered evidence of a major terrorist operation. Unfortunately, the airport's security chief, Captain Carmen Lorenzo, refuses to take him seriously. Lorenzo sees John as an outsider interfering with local law enforcement and assumes he is exaggerating the situation because of his past experiences in Los Angeles. Despite John's repeated warnings that the dead man was clearly part of a much larger military group, Lorenzo dismisses his concerns and orders his officers to continue with normal operations. Frustrated, John realizes that he may once again be the only person who understands the danger before it is too late. While John argues with airport security, the mysterious commandos quietly move into position. Hidden beneath the airport, they seize control of an abandoned church and transform it into a secret command center filled with advanced military communication equipment. Their leader calmly gives a single order. Seconds later, every radar screen inside the control tower suddenly goes black. Die Hard to the airport loses all communication, instantly putting every aircraft in the sky in deadly danger. John McClane realizes that Christmas has turned into a nightmare once again. Inside the air traffic control tower, confusion spreads almost immediately as every radar screen goes dark. Controllers frantically press buttons, activate backup systems, and try to restore communications, but nothing works. Within seconds, the airport completely loses contact with every aircraft approaching Washington Dulles International Airport. Dozens of passenger planes carrying thousands of people are now circling above the snow-covered city without any guidance from the ground. As panic begins to spread through the control room, no one can understand how such an advanced communication system could fail so suddenly. What appears to be a technical malfunction is actually the first stage of a carefully planned terrorist operation. Deep inside an abandoned church hidden near the airport, a mysterious group of commandos calmly monitors every radio transmission using sophisticated military equipment. Their leader, Colonel Stewart, finally reveals himself. A former U.S. Special Forces officer, Stewart is highly disciplined, extremely intelligent, and completely ruthless. Standing before his heavily armed team, he explains that everything has gone exactly according to plan. The airport's communication systems are now under their control, and from this moment on, every pilot, air traffic controller, and government agency will unknowingly follow their instructions. Stewart has no interest in stealing money or taking hostages. His mission is far more dangerous: rescuing the imprisoned dictator, General Ramon Esperanza, before he can be transferred into federal custody. Meanwhile, John McClane becomes increasingly frustrated when Captain Lorenzo refuses to believe his warnings. McClane insists that the man he killed was no ordinary criminal, but a professionally trained soldier carrying military-grade weapons. Lorenzo dismisses the evidence, convinced that the communication failure is nothing more than an unfortunate technical problem. McClane realizes that precious time is being wasted while the terrorists continue strengthening their position. Knowing he cannot simply stand by while innocent people remain in danger, he decides to investigate on his own, just as he did 2 years earlier in Los Angeles. High above the airport, Holly McClane's flight joins several other commercial aircraft circling endlessly through the freezing night sky. Inside the cabin, the passengers remain calm because they still have no idea what is happening. The pilots quietly communicate with what they believe are airport controllers, unaware that every transmission is being intercepted by Stewart's team. As the planes continue flying in wide circles while waiting for permission to land, their fuel levels slowly begin to drop. Every passing minute makes the situation more dangerous, yet no one aboard realizes how little time they truly have left. Back inside the airport terminal, government officials begin arriving after learning about the communication failure. Among them is Major Grant, the commander of an elite military counter-terrorist unit specially trained to handle hostage situations. Grant confidently assures everyone that his men will quickly find and eliminate whoever is behind the attack. His arrival restores the airport authorities' confidence, and Captain Lorenzo immediately puts his full trust in the military operation. John, however, remains unconvinced. Years of experience have taught him that things are not always what they seem, and something about the situation simply doesn't feel right. Determined to find the terrorists' location, John retraces the route taken by the man he fought earlier. Following footprints through the snow, he eventually discovers a trail leading toward an abandoned church near the edge of the airport. As he cautiously approaches the building, John notices heavily armed guards patrolling outside with precise military discipline. Peering through a broken window, he spots sophisticated communication equipment covering the interior. along with Colonel Stewart calmly overseeing the entire operation. Realizing he has finally found the terrorists' headquarters, John immediately contacts airport authorities by radio and urgently requests military support before the commandos detect him. Unfortunately, reinforcements never arrive in time. One of Stewart's soldiers spots John hiding outside. Gunfire erupts instantly, sending bullets tearing through the snowy churchyard. John dives behind abandoned vehicles as commandos surround him from multiple directions. The peaceful winter landscape suddenly descends into chaos, with automatic weapons echoing through the freezing night. Using his police instincts and sheer determination, John manages to escape the deadly ambush, but not before discovering one terrifying truth. These are not ordinary terrorists. They are elite military commandos, are highly trained, heavily armed, and completely prepared for war. As John races back toward the airport, Colonel Stewart calmly smiles, knowing that everything unfolding is exactly what he expected. The rescue mission has only just begun, and soon hundreds of innocent passengers will become hostages without ever leaving their airplanes. John barely survives the ambush at the abandoned church, diving through the snow as bullets rip into the frozen ground around him. The commandos pursue him relentlessly, moving with military precision and covering one another with deadly accuracy. John realizes that he is no longer dealing with ordinary criminals. Every member of Colonel Stewart's team is a highly trained soldier capable of executing complex tactical maneuvers under extreme pressure. Taking advantage of the darkness and heavy snowfall, John finally manages to shake his pursuers and make his way back toward the airport. Exhausted but determined, John now has undeniable proof that a highly organized terrorist force has taken control of the airport's communication systems. When he returns, he immediately reports everything he witnessed to Captain Lorenzo, Major Grant, and the airport authorities. He tells them about the abandoned church, the sophisticated communication equipment, and the heavily armed commandos preparing for a massive operation. However, Lorenzo remains stubbornly unconvinced, accusing John of interfering with official police work instead of allowing trained professionals to handle the crisis. Major Grant, on the other hand, listens carefully. After reviewing John's description, he agrees to send his elite special forces unit to investigate the church. Although Grant appears calm and professional, John notices something unusual about his behavior. The Major seems almost too confident, as if he already knows more than he is willing to admit. Meanwhile, high above Washington, the situation inside the passenger aircraft becomes increasingly desperate. More than a dozen commercial airplanes continue circling through the freezing night while waiting for permission to land. Fuel gauges steadily drop as our pilots repeatedly request updated landing instructions. Every response they receive comes directly from Colonel Stewart's team, who expertly imitate airport controllers over the radio. The passengers remain largely unaware of the danger, believing bad weather is causing temporary delays. Harlin sits quietly aboard her flight, reading a magazine and occasionally looking out of the window at the endless snow-covered clouds, completely unaware that she is flying directly into one of the deadliest terrorist plots in aviation history. Inside the abandoned church, Colonel Stewart receives confirmation that General Ramon Esperanza's military transport aircraft is rapidly approaching American airspace. Stewart confidently informs his men that the operation is entering its most important phase. Every communication system, a runway light and navigation beacon remains completely under his control. The terrorists who have effectively turned into one of America's busiest airports into their own military base without firing a single shot inside the terminal. Stewart calmly explains that once Esperanza safely lands, the entire team will disappear before authorities fully understand what happened. To prove that he is serious, Stewart decides to send a horrifying message to the government. Using the stolen air traffic controller frequencies, his team secretly alters the altitude information transmitted to an incoming passenger aircraft. Believing they are following official landing instructions, the pilots begin descending exactly as directed. Unfortunately, the altitude data has been deliberately changed. Instead of guiding the plane safely toward the runway, Stewart is leading it directly toward the ground. Inside the controller tower, genuine air traffic controllers suddenly realize something is terribly wrong. They desperately attempt to warn the aircraft, but every radio transmission is blocked by shootouts of powerful communication equipment. Helplessly, they watch the passenger jet continue descending through the heaviest snowstorm. The pilots remain completely unaware that they are flying far below the safe landing path. Seconds later, as the aircraft slams violently into the frozen ground just short of the runway, erupting into a massive fireball that lights up the night sky. The devastating explosion kills everyone on board instantly. The horrifying crash shocks everyone at the airport. Emergency vehicles race toward the burning wreckage while terrified controllers stare in disbelief. Captain Lorenzo finally realizes John had been telling her the truth all along. This was never a simple equipment failure. Hundreds of our innocent lives have just been lost because someone deliberately manipulated the airport's navigation, music systems. The entire terminal falls silent as firefighters battle the enormous blaze consuming the wreckage. For John, the tragedy becomes deeply personal. He knows the terrorists have crossed a line from which there is no return. As smoke rises into the freezing night, Colonel Stewart calmly watches the burning wreckage from inside the abandoned church. Without the slightest sign of regret, he contacts airport authorities and delivers his first official demand. General Ramona Esperanza must be released immediately or every remaining airplane in the sky will suffer exactly, music, the same fate. The countdown has officially begun. The horrifying crash of the passenger aircraft leaves the entire airport in complete shock. Emergency crews rush across the snow-covered runway, but there is nothing left to save. The burning wreckage lights up the freezing night as firefighters struggle to control the massive flames. Hundreds of innocent passengers have lost their lives within seconds, and the tragedy proves beyond any doubt that the terrorists are willing to kill without hesitation. Inside the control tower, air traffic controllers stand frozen in disbelief, knowing they were powerless to stop the disaster. The atmosphere throughout Washington Dulles International Airport changes instantly. This is no longer a communication failure or a hostage situation. It has become a full-scale terrorist attack. Only moments later, Colonel Stewart contacts the airport authorities through the stolen communication system. Speaking with complete confidence, he introduces himself and calmly accepts responsibility for the crash. There is no emotion in his voice as he explains that the destruction of the aircraft was merely a demonstration of what he is capable of. He warns that there are still numerous commercial airplanes circling above the airport, all running dangerously low on fuel. If the government refuses to cooperate, he promises that every remaining aircraft will meet the same fate. His demand is simple but terrifying. General Ramirez Panza must be released immediately and allowed to land safely at Dulles Airport. Only then will Stewart restore the airport's navigation systems and allow the stranded planes to land. The FBI, airport officials, military commanders, and local police quickly gather inside an emergency operations center to discuss their options. Tension fills the room as everyone realizes the impossible situation they now face. They release Esperanza, a dangerous dictator will escape justice. If they refuse, hundreds of innocent passengers trapped in the sky could die within the next few hours. Captain Lorenzo, who previously dismissed John's warnings, finally admits that the New Yorker detective understood the threat longer before anyone else. Although he reluctantly begins listening to John's suggestions, disagreements between the FBI, local police, and the military continue wasting valuable time while the fuel remaining aboard the circling aircraft grows lower every minute. Meanwhile, Major Grant prepares his elite Special Forces unit to assault the abandoned church where Stewart's men are hiding. Equipped with advanced weapons, night vision goggles, and military helicopters, Grant confidently assures everyone that the terrorists will soon be eliminated. John volunteers to accompany the assault team because he is the only person who has actually seen Stewart's headquarters. Although Grant reluctantly agrees, he wants John to stay out of the soldiers' way and allow trained professionals to handle the operation. John senses that something still feels wrong, but with so many lives depending on success, he has no choice except to join the mission. Higher above the airport, conditions about the circling aircraft continue deteriorating. Pilots carefully monitor their remaining fuel while trying to keep nervous passengers calm. Holly's flight is among those trapped in the holding pattern, and although she notices the unusually long delay, She still has no idea how serious the situation has become. Flight attendants continue serving drinks and reassuring passengers that they will land soon, unaware that every minute hair brings them closer to disaster. The pilots privately discuss emergency alternatives, but nearby airport's area also overwhelmed by severe weather, and leaving very few safe options. Late that night, Major Grant's assault team quietly approaches the abandoned church through the snow-covered woods. Jonah follows closely behind as the soldiers surround the building from multiple directions. Everything appears perfectly coordinated, and for a brief moment, it seems the nightmare may finally be coming to an end. Grant gives the signal and his men storm inside with incredible speed, opening fire on every terrorist they encounter. Loud explosions and automatic gunfire echo through the frozen landscape as John watches the fierce battle unfold. After several intense minutes, the shooting suddenly stops. The commandos report complete success. Every terrorist has supposedly been eliminated. The operation appears to be over. But as John walks through the battlefield, he notices something impossible. The bodies lying in the snow are carrying blank ammunition, not real bullets. His expression suddenly changes. He realizes the entire battle was carefully staged, and Major Grant's soldiers were never fighting the terrorist. They were working with them from the very beginning. John stares in disbelief as he picks up one of the rifles left behind after the firefight. He removes the magazine and immediately notices something that makes his blood run cold. Every round inside is a blank cartridge. There are no live bullets. Looking around the snowy battlefield, he quickly realizes the entire assault was nothing more than an elaborate performance. The explosions, the gunfire, and the apparent victory had all been carefully staged to fool the FBI, airport authorities, and everyone watching from a distance. Colonel Stewart's commandos and Major Grant's supposedly elite rescue team had never been enemies. They were working together all along. Before John can expose the truth, Stewart's men quietly disappear into the darkness exactly as planned. Major Grant calmly orders his soldiers to withdraw, pretending the terrorists escaped during the confusion. The airport command center receives the false report that the operation was unsuccessful because of poor visibility and difficult terrain. Everyone believes Stewart narrowly escaped another military assault, while in reality the terrorists have become even stronger than before. John desperately tries to tell Lorenzo and the FBI that Grant has betrayed them, but his accusations sound unbelievable. After all, Grant is a decorated military officer trusted by the United States government. No one wants to believe that America's own Special Forces commander could secretly be helping international terrorists. Meanwhile, high above Washington, the situation inside the circling passenger planes becomes critical. Fuel gauges continue dropping toward empty, forcing pilots to calculate exactly how many minutes so far flight remain. The atmosphere inside the Holly's aircraft also begins changing. Flight attendants can no longer hide their concern as the captain announces another unexpected delay due to severe operational problems at the airport. Although he carefully avoids mentioning terrorism, passengers immediately sense that something far more serious than bad weather is happening. Nervous conversations spread throughout the cabin as worried families glance through the windows at the endless darkness below. Back at the airport, Colonel Stewart contacts the authorities on CR again. His voice remains calm, almost too emotionless, as he reminds them that every minute of delay brings an aircraft closer to disaster. He warns her that several passenger jets now have barely enough fuel to remain airborne. If General Esperanza is not delivered immediately, he promises to destroy another plane as proof that he is not bluffing. This time, however, the government has little room to argue. Music. After witnessing the destruction of the first aircraft, everyone understands that Stewart possesses a complete control over the airport's navigation systems. The lives of hundreds of innocent passengers now depend entirely on his decisions. At the same time, General Ramon Esperanza's military transport aircraft enters the final stage of its journey toward Washington. Inside the plane, the imprisoned dictator sits quietly under a heavy guard, appearing strangely calm, despite the extraordinary security surrounding him. Unknown to the American soldiers escorting him, Esperanza already knows that Stewart's rescue operation is unfolding exactly as planned. Confident that freedom is only minutes away, He patiently waits for the aircraft to receive landing instructions. John refuses to give up. Convinced that Grant's betrayal is the key to stopping the terrorists, he begins searching for evidence that will expose the conspiracy. Retracing the events of the staged assault, he suddenly remembers the unusual military boots worn by Stewart's men during the earlier firefight. Returning to the bodge of the first terrorist he killed in Sadler the airport, John notices the same distinctive boots. Comparing them to those worn by Grant's soldiers, he realizes they are identical. It is the final piece of evidence he needs. The terrorists and the special forces unit belong to the same military organization. John rushes back toward the command center, desperately trying to warn everyone before Esperanza's plane arrives. But while he races through the airport, Grant quietly contacts Stewart over a secure military radio. Both men exchange calm professional updates as though discussing an ordinary training exercise. Grant confirms that suspicion is beginning to grow, but reassures Stewart that he will handle John McClane personally if necessary. Stewart simply smiles and tells Grant to prepare for the final stage of the mission. Outside, the snowstorm grows even heavier. Esperanza's aircraft approaches the airport. The circling passenger planes are almost out of fuel, and hidden beneath the frozen runway, the traitors are prepared to welcome the world's most dangerous dictator back to freedom. As the blizzard grows stronger, the situation at Washington Dulles International Airport becomes even more desperate. The stranded passenger aircraft have now been circling for hours and fuel levels are reaching dangerously low levels. Pilots begin calculating emergency landing options, but every nearby airport is either closed because of the severe weather or are too far away to reach safely. Inside the cabins, worried passengers notice flight attendants whispering to one another while the captains continue making reassuring announcements that hide the terrifying truth. Holly McClane remains calm, believing the delay is caused by the snowstorm, but even she begins to realize that something far more serious is happening. Inside the airport command center, government officials finally decide they have no choice but to negotiate with Colonel Stewart. Hundreds of innocent lives are at risk and every passing minute increases the chance of another disaster. Stewart contacts Thema once again, calmly reminding everyone that the airport remains completely under his control. He orders the authorities to clear one runway and prepare it for the arrival of General Ramon Esperanza's transport aircraft. If they obey, he promises to restore the navigation systems and allow the stranded passenger planes to land safely. If they refuse, he warns that another aircraft will crash before the night is over. John McClane refuses to accept surrender as the only option. Carrying the evidence that Major Grant and his soldiers are secretly working with the terrorists, he desperately tries to convince Captain Lorenzo, the FBI agents, and military commanders that the rescue operation has been compromised from the beginning. Although several officials begin taking his accusations seriously, Grant immediately dismisses John's claims as the paranoid imagination of a reckless police officer. Because Grant is a respected military commander with an outstanding service record, most people choose to believe him instead of John. Once again, McClane finds himself almost completely alone. Meanwhile, Colonel Stewart and his commandos prepare for the arrival of Esperanza's aircraft. Hidden near the runway, they activate a portable navigation equipment capable of secretly guiding the military transporter to a safe landing while every official airport system remains disabled. Stewart personally supervises every detail of the operation, making sure nothing is left to chance. His men are positioned vehicles, weapons, and escape routes with military precision. The rescue mission that has been planned for months is only minutes away from a success. High above the airport, Esperanza's aircraft finally reaches the designated holding area. The Americana soldiers escorting the imprisoned dictator remain unaware that the landing instructions they receive are coming directly from Stewart instead of the airport control tower. Trusting the familiar military radio procedures, the pilots begin descending exactly as instructed. At the same time, several fighter jets patrol the skies nearby, believing they are protecting the transport aircraft from outside threats. None of them realize the real danger is already waiting on the ground. Jonah suddenly comes up with a desperate plan. If he cannot stop the terrorists through official channels, he will stop Esperanza's aircraft himself. Racing across the airport in a police vehicle, he heads toward the isolated runway where Stewart secretly intends to receive the dictator. Snow and ice make driving almost impossible, but Jonah pushes the vehicle to its limits, knowing he has only a few minutes before the transport touches down. Every second matters because once Esperanza reaches to the ground, escaping with stewards or commandos will become much easier. As John approaches the runway, he spots the terrorists' hidden landing lights blowing through the heavy snowfall. Stewart's portable navigation system has successfully created the illusion of an official runway guiding Esperanza directly toward the perfect landing point. Without hesitation, Jonah accelerates toward the lights, determined to destroy them before the aircraft reaches the ground. Bullets immediately begin striking his vehicle as Stewart's men open fire, trying to stop him before he can interfere. Ignoring the gunfire, John slams his vehicle straight into the portable landing equipment. The lights explode into darkness. Sparks fly across the frozen runway. For a brief moment, it seems he has ruined Stewart's entire plan. But Colonel Stewart simply smiles because he already prepared a second landing system and Esperanza's aircraft continues descending toward freedom. Jonah watches in frustration as the military transport carrying General Ramon Esperanza continues descending through the heavy snow despite his desperate attempt to destroy the portable landing lights. For a brief moment, he believed crashing his vehicle into Stewart's navigation equipment had saved the day. Instead, Colonel Stewart calmly activates a hidden backup system positioned farther down the runway. New landing lights suddenly illuminate the frozen ground, guiding Esperanza's aircraft safely toward the airport. John's courageous sacrifice has delayed the terrorists, but it has not stopped them. The transport plane touches down smoothly, rolling across the snow-covered runway, exactly where Stewart intended. Before the aircraft can come to a complete stop, Stewart and his commandos are surrounded with military vehicles and heavily armed soldiers. The Americana security team escorting Esperanza immediately realizes something is terribly wrong. A fierce gun battle erupts across the runway as bullets steer through the freezing night. Several guards are killed within seconds while others desperately attempt to defend the prisoner. Despite their efforts, Stewart's elite commandos overwhelmed them with superior numbers and flawless military coordination. Inside the aircraft, General Esperanza remains remarkably calm. Even while gunfire echoes through the cabin, he confidently waits for the inevitable moment when Stewart's men reach him. Seconds later, the terrorists force open the aircraft door and eliminate the remaining guards protecting the dictator. Stewart personally walks inside, smiling as he greets Esperanza with military respect. The two men shake hands, confirming that the entire operation has unfolded exactly as planned. After months of preparation, one of the world's most dangerous criminals is finally free once again. John arrives just in time to witness the rescue from a distance. Furious that he has failed to stop Esperanza's escape, he immediately opens fire on the terrorists. A massive shootout erupts across the icy runway as John uses abandoned vehicles and airport equipment for cover. Although he manages to eliminate several commandos, Stewart's men quickly return overwhelming fire. Major Grant suddenly arrives with his so-called Special Forces team appearing to support John. Instead, Grant openly reveals his betrayal by ordering his soldiers to protect Stewart and Esperanza rather than arrest them. John narrowly escapes another deadly crossfire after realizing the full extent of Grant's treachery. With Esperanza safely rescued, Stewart gives the next order. The terrorists quickly board awaiting a military cargo plane that has secretly landed nearby. Their escape aircraft has been fully prepared with extra fuel, weapons, and supplies for an international flight. Stewart's objective is no longer simply escaping the airport. He intends to fly Esperanza out of the United States before military forces, music, can organize a proper pursuit. As engines begin warming up, the terrorists confidently believe a victory is finally within reach. Meanwhile, the crisis above the airport reaches an even more critical stage. Several passenger aircraft now report dangerously low fuel levels. Pilots inform the control tower that they can no longer remain airborne much longer. Holly's flight is among those running out of options. Inside the cabin, The atmosphere has completely changed. Flight attendants quietly prepare passengers for the possibility of an emergency landing while trying not to spread panic. Holly notices the fear on the crew's faces and finally realizes the situation is far worse than anyone has admitted. She has no idea that her own husband dies risking his life below to save every aircraft trapped in the sky. John refuses to let Stuart escape, while everyone else believes the terrorists have won. He remembers something important from the earlier runway battle. During the firefight, one of the cargo plane's fuel tanks was struck by gunfire, causing aviation fuel to leak onto the snow-covered runway. Looking across the frozen airfield, John notices the longer trail of fuel stretching behind the aircraft as it slowly begins taxiing it toward takeoff. An idea immediately forms in his mind, one incredibly dangerous plan that could destroy the terrorists before they ever leave the ground. He grabs a nearby lighter, looks toward the leaking fuel, then watches as towards cargo plane accelerates toward the runway. The terrorists believe the air have already won, but John McClane is preparing one final move, a move that could either save everyone or kill him along with the terrorists. As the cargo plane carrying Colonel Stewart, General Luis Paranza, and the remaining commandos begins accelerating down the snow-covered runway, John McClane realizes this is his final opportunity to stop them. The aircraft is only seconds away from a takeoff, and once it becomes airborne, there will be almost no chance of catching it before it leaves American airspace. Looking down, John notices the long trail of aviation fuel leaking from the damaged wings stretching across the frozen runway like a narrow river. The gunfire during the rescue operation had punctured one of the aircraft's fuel tanks, creating the perfect weakness. John understands exactly how dangerous his idea is, but he also knows there is no other option. Meanwhile, inside the cargo plane, Stewart confidently believes the mission has been completed successfully. Esperanza thanks him for the flawless rescue, praising the discipline and loyalty of his former Special Forces soldiers. Major Grant and the surviving members of his unit settle into the aircraft, convinced they have outsmarted every American law enforcement agency. Stewart looks out the cockpit window at the burning airport lights disappearing behind them and smiles, believing John McClane has finally been defeated. None of them notice the leaking fuel continuing to spread across the runway beneath the aircraft. Back inside the airport, officials desperately try to restore normal operations before the remaining passenger aircraft run out of fuel. Engineers work around the clock repairing the communication systems damaged by Stewart's team while controllers manually guide the circling aircraft using temporary equipment. Although progress is finally being made, time is running out. Several pilots report that they have only minutes of fuel remaining. Hull's aircraft continues circling through the snowstorm and the passengers have now been informed that an emergency situation is unfolding below. Fear spreads throughout the cabin, but Holly quietly remains hopeful, believing somehow John will find a way to stop whatever is happening. Outside, John calmly takes out his lighter and stares at the trail of fuel, leading directly toward the speeding cargo plane. The freezing wind howls across the runway as the engines roar louder and louder. Every instinct tells him that standing so close to thousands of gallons of jet fuel is incredibly dangerous, but he refuses to back away. Waiting until the aircraft reaches maximum speed, Jonah flicks open the lighter, whispers out quiet prayer, and throws it toward the fuel-covered runway. For a split second, nothing happens. Then the fuel suddenly ignites. A massive wall of fire races across the snow at incredible speed, following the leaking fuel directly toward the aircraft. Stewart notices the flames too late. His expression changes from confidence to absolute terror as the burning trail reaches the damaged wing. An enormous explosion tears through the cargo plane, engulfing it in a gigantic fireball before it can leave the ground. The blast lights up the entire airport as pieces of the aircraft scatter across the runway. Colonel Stewart, General Esperanza, Major Grant, and every surviving terrorist are killed instantly. The rescue mission that had been planned for months ends in a single devastating explosion. The explosion creates another unexpected miracle. The enormous pillar of fire rises hundreds of feet. Music into the night sky, becoming visible from miles away. Pilots are circling above immediately notice the blazing runway through the snowstorm. The bright flames provide a clear visual reference that allows them to identify the airport's exact location despite the severe weather and damaged navigation systems. Air traffic controllers quickly realize they can now guide the remaining aircraft toward the safe runway using the fire as a landmark. One by one, the stranded passenger planes begin landing safely. Holly's aircraft is among the first to touch down. As the wheels have finally reached the runway, passengers burst into applause. They have no idea that a single man standing alone in the snow made their survival possible. And John Lan, exhausted, bruised, and covered in ice, quietly watches as the first airplane safely lands. As the blazing wreckage of Carl Stewart's cargo plane burns across the frozen runway, the nightmare that had gripped Washington Dulles International Airport finally begins to fade. Emergency vehicles race toward the explosion while the firefighters battle the massive flame created by thousands of gallons of burning jet fuel. Although the explosion destroys the terrorists and their escape aircraft, it also creates a brighter column of fire that cuts through the heavy snowstorm. Air traffic controllers immediately realize the burning runway has become the perfect visual landmark for pilots who have been trapped in the sky for hours. Using emergency radio frequencies and the giant fire as our reference point, they begin carefully guiding each stranded aircraft toward our safe landing. After enduring hours of fear, confusion, and rapidly decreasing our fuel supplies, the pilots finally receive clear instructions that bring hope to everyone on board. One after another, the passenger aircraft descends safely through the snow-covered clouds. Every successful landing is greeted with loud applause inside the control tower as exhausted controllers celebrate the survival of hundreds of innocent people. Holly Lan's flight is among the first to touch down safely, and as the wheels ride the icy runway, passengers trill with relief after believing they might never see their families again. Inside the cabin, no one realizes how closely they came to disaster or that their lives were saved because one determined police officer refused to give up even after every authority around him had failed. The terrifying ordeal finally comes to an end as flight attendants comfort emotional passengers who are simply grateful to be alive. Meanwhile, John Lan collapses onto the snowy ground, completely exhausted after the longest night of his life. His clothes are torn, his face is bruised, and every part of his body aches from hours of non-stop fighting against heavily armored terrorists. Despite the pain, he quietly watches the passenger planes, music land one after another with a smile on his face. Unlike many action heroes, John never sought fame or recognition. His only goal was to protect innocent people, and seeing every aircraft arrive safely is all the reward he needs. Even after everything he has endured, he remains the same ordinary police officer who simply refused to let evil win. Inside the airport terminal, Captain Lawrence finally approaches John with genuine respect. Earlier in the night, Lawrence repeatedly dismissed John's warnings and treated him as an unwanted outsider interfering with police operations. Now, after witnessing the destruction caused by Stewart's terrorist and learning about Major Grant's betrayal, he openly admits that John had been right from the very beginning. The FBI agents and military officials also recognize that without Jay's courage and determination, Colonel Stewart's plan would have succeeded completely. Although the victory came at a terribly cost with the loss of innocent lives aboard the crashed aircraft, countless others survived because John refused to stop fighting even when he was standing completely alone. A few moments later, Harley finally leaves her aircraft and enters the terminal after safely landing. Still unaware of everything that happened on the ground, she searches through the crowd for her husband. When she finally spots Jonah walking toward her, bruised, exhausted, and covered in snow, she immediately runs into his arms. The emotional reunion reminds everyone why John fought so desperately throughout the night. It was never about proving himself or becoming a hero. It was about protecting the people he loved while saving everyone else caught in the terrorist deadly plan. Their Christmas reunion is simple but deeply meaningful because they both understand how close they came to losing each other forever. As emergency crews continue clearing the runway, investigators begin examining the remains of Stewart's operation. Evidence recovered from the abandoned church, the destroyed cargo plane, and the airport communication systems that confirms the full extent of the conspiracy. Major Grant's betrayal shocked military leaders across the country, while the death of General Esperanza ensures the dangerous dictator will never again threaten innocent lives. The airport slowly returns to normal as our stranded passengers reunite with their families, unaware of how narrowly Theo escaped one of the deadliest terrorist attacks in aviation history. For John McClane, however, the night leaves behind music, another unforgettably reminder that danger always seems to find him when he least expects it. Although the crisis is finally over, a near final chapter still remains. The last part will explain the ending in greater detail, explore the movie's deeper themes, reveal what made Die Hard 2 an era of the greatest action sequels ever made, and conclude John McClane's unforgettable Christmas adventure with our complete ending explanation. As dawn slowly approaches, the airport begins recovering from one of the deadliest terrorist attacks in American history. Firefighters continue extinguishing the burning wreckage of Stewart's cargo plane while federal investigators secure every part of the runway. The destroyed aircraft confirms that Colonel Stewart, a General Esperanza, Major Grant, and the remaining terrorists have all been killed in the explosion. Although the immediate threat has ended, officials are forced to confront the devastating cost of the night's events. The earlier passenger plane that Stewart deliberately crashed claimed hundreds of innocent lives, leaving a permanent scar on everyone who witnessed the tragedy. Despite the heartbreaking losses, the successful landing of every remaining aircraft proves that John McClane prevented an even greater catastrophe that could have claimed thousands more lives. Inside the airport terminal, emergency medical teams treat exhausted passengers who have spent hours trapped inside the circling aircraft with almost no fuel remaining. Families embrace one another with tears of relief after believing they might never see each other again. News reporters begin arriving from across the country as information about the terrorist attack spreads rapidly through television broadcast. Although many passengers still have no idea exactly what happened during the night, they soon learned that one determined New York police officer fought arms single-handedly against an entire team of elite military terrorists. John's actions quickly become the focus of every conversation inside the airport, even though he remains far more interested in making sure Holly is safe than accepting anyone's praise. Meanwhile, federal authorities begin examining the enormous amount of evidence left behind by Stewart's operation. Inside the abandoned church, investigators discover sophisticated military communication systems, stolen airport frequencies, advanced navigation equipment, and detailed plans for Esperanza's rescue mission. The shocking discovery confirms that the conspiracy had been carefully organized long before the terrorists arrived at Dallas Airport. Even more disturbing is the evidence linking Major Grant and his Special Forces unit to the operation. Military officials are stunned to learn that one of their most respected commanders secretly betrayed his own country in exchange for loyalty to Esperanza. The revelation creates a political scandal that will continue long after the events of the terrible Christmas Eve. John finally has an opportunity to sit down after hours of non-stop fighting, but the moment of peace does not last very long. Captain Lorenzo approaches him once again, this time with complete respect instead of hostility. Embarrassed by the way he treated John earlier in the night, Lorenzo sincerely apologizes for ignoring his warnings and refusing to believe him. John simply smiles, joking that people never seem to listen to him until buildings start exploding. The light-hearted exchange here reminds everyone that despite everything he has endured, John has never lost his sense of humor. It is one of the qualities that allows him to survive situations that would completely overwhelm almost anyone else. At the same time, Holly quietly reflects on the terrifying night while watching emergency crews work outside the terminal windows. She has experienced enough adventures with John to understand that trouble somehow follows him wherever he goes. Even so, she also knows that John's willingness to risk everything for strangers is exactly what makes him the man she loves. Their relationship has survived an impossible Christmas because both understand that courage sometimes demands enormous personal sacrifice. Although neither of them says much, the quiet moments they share together speak louder than any words ever could. As airport operations slowly return to normal, The surviving passengers finally begin collecting their luggage and preparing to continue their interrupted journeys. Snow continues falling gently across the runways, covering the skies left behind by the night's violence. For most travelers, Christmas will forever be remembered as the night they narrowly escaped death. For John McClane, however, it becomes another unforgettably reminder that ordinary people can't accomplish extraordinary things when they refuse to surrender in the face of impossible odds. Even after defeating another group of ruthless terrorists, he never considers himself a hero. In his own mind, he simply did what any good police officer should do: protect innocent lives no matter the cost. Although the terrorists have been defeated and the airport is finally safe again, John and Holly's journey is not quite over. One final chapter still remains to conclude the story, explore the deeper meaning behind the film, and explain why Die Hard 2 remains one of the greatest action sequels ever made. With the terrorists defeated, and the remaining passengers finally safe on the ground, the investigation into the night's horrifying events officially begins. Federal agents, military investigators, and airport authorities work together to reconstruct every step of Conley Stewart's operation. They quickly discovered that the entire attack had been meticulously planned long before Christmas Eve. Stewart's team had secretly studied the airport's communication network, security procedures, and military transport schedules for months, allowing them to seize control of the navigation systems with astonishing precision. Investigators also uncover overwhelming evidence proving that Major Grant and his Special Forces unit had willingly betrayed their country to help rescue General Esperanza. This shocking revelation sends waves through the U.S. military, proving that the greatest threat had come not only from foreign terrorists but also from trusted men working inside the system itself. As officials examine the abandoned church that served as Stewart's headquarters, they recover sophisticated military communication equipment capable of overriding the airport's radar and radio frequencies. Experts are stunned by the complexity of the operation, realizing that the terrorists exploited technology that was originally designed to protect civilian aircraft. Every piece of equipment found inside the church confirms that the disaster was carefully engineered to create a maximum confusion while leaving authorities powerless to respond. The investigation also reveals that the first passenger plane was deliberately sacrificed to force the government into negotiations, making the tragedy one of the darkest moments in the entire Die Hard franchise. Although justice has finally been served, nothing can erase the lives that were lost because of Stewart's ruthless ambition. Meanwhile, John McClane quietly watches emergency workers helping frightened passengers reunite with their loved ones inside the terminal. Seeing families embrace one another reminds him of why he continued fighting despite overwhelming odds throughout the night. Unlike the politicians, military officers and government agencies now arguing over responsibility, John never cared about public recognition or political consequences. His only concern was making sure innocent people survived. The sight of children running into their parents' arms and exhausted travelers thanking rescue workers gives him a sense of satisfaction far greater than any medal or public ceremony ever could. For John, saving lives has always been the only reward that truly matters. Holly notices the exhaustion written across John's face and gently reminds him that he has once again carried the weight of an impossible situation almost entirely by himself. Although she jokes that every Christmas they spend together somehow turns into a disaster, both of them understand how fortunate they are simply to be standing together again. Their relationship has survived another terrifying ordeal because it is built on trust, resilience, and the quiet understanding that danger is part of John's life as our police officer. Without dramatic speeches or emotional promises, they simply hold each other for a moment, grateful that these Christmas did not end in tragedy for their own family. Captain Lorzello approaches John one final time, no longer as an arrogant airport commander, but as someone who genuinely respects the detective's courage. He admits that he had listened to John from the very beginning. Many innocent lives might have been saved. John shrugs off the apology with his usual dry humor, reminding Lorenzo that arguing with the stubborn police officers is practically a holiday tradition. The light-hearted exchange finally breaks the tension that has filled the airport throughout the night, allowing everyone to breathe a little easier after surviving such an unimaginable crisis. Even the FBI agents who once dismissed John are forced to acknowledge that his instincts and determination accomplished what entire military units could not. As the first rays of morning sunlight begin shining through the snowy clouds, airport operations slowly return to normal. Damaged runways are cleared, stranded passengers continue their journeys, and investigators remove the last pieces of evidence from the crime scene. The airport that had become a battlefield only hours earlier once again fills with the ordinary sounds of travelers, departing flights, and holiday reunions. Yet beneath that normal appearance lies a story that very few people will ever fully understand. A story about a near-ordinary detective who stood alone against a highly trained terrorist army and refused to surrender when everyone else believed defeat was inevitable. His courage not only destroyed shootouts conspiracy, but also saved hundreds of innocent lives that would otherwise have been lost. Although the action has ended and the villains have been defeated, the story of Die Hard 2 still has one final chapter remaining. The concluding part will explain the deeper themes behind the film, analyze its ending, discuss why it remains an of the greatest action sequels ever made, and bring John Land's unforgettable Christmas adventure to our proper cinematic conclusion. With the Colonel Stewart's terrorist organization completely destroyed and General Louis Parens killed before he could escape, Die Hard 2 reaches a satisfying conclusion that perfectly reinforces the themes established throughout the film. On the surface, the movie is an explosive action thriller filled with gunfights, aircraft, massive explosions, and high-stakes suspense. Beneath all the action, however, it tells a much deeper story about courage, integrity, and the responsibility of standing against evil even when no one believes you. John Malana spends almost the entire film fighting not only ruthless terrorists, but also the disbelief and arrogance of the very authorities he is trying to help. Time after time, he is ignored, mocked, and dismissed. Yet he never allows a frustration to distract him from the mission of protecting innocent lives. That unwavering determination is what ultimately prevents an even greater tragedy from taking place. One of the strongest messages in the film is that true heroes are ordinary people who refuse to give up. Unlike the elite soldiers serving under Colonel Stewart or the highly trained special forces commanded by Major Grant, John possesses no extraordinary military resources, no advanced technology, and no carefully organized team supporting him. He is simply a New York police detective who happens to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Yet it is his experience, quick thinking, and relentless determination that repeatedly overcome enemies who appear stronger and better prepared. The movie reminds viewers that courage is not measured by rank, uniforms, or weapons, but by their willingness to keep fighting when every obstacle seems impossible to overcome. The film also explores the dangers of corruption and blind trust. Major Grant's betrayal is one of the movie's biggest surprises because everyone automatically assumes that decorated military officers must always be trustworthy. Stewart successfully exploits that assumption using respected institutions and sophisticated technology as weapons against innocent people. Pilots trust the radio instructions they receive. Airport officials trust military authority, and government agencies trust to experienced commanders without questioning their motives by revealing that the real danger comes from people abusing positions of power. Die Hard 2 reminds us that integrity is far more valuable than titles or reputation. Honest individuals like John Malana ultimately become society's greatest defense against corruption. Another important element of the story is John's relationship with Holly. Unlike manu action films where family serves only as a background motivation, Holly represents the normal life John constantly struggles to protect. Every dangerous decision he makes is driven not by fame or personal glory, but by his desire to ensure innocent people, including his own wife, return home safely. The quiet reunion at the airport carries a genuine emotional weight because both characters understand music how easily they could have lost near another. That emotional connection gives the film heart, preventing it from becoming just another series of action scenes and explosions. Director Renny Harlin successfully expands the scale of the original Die Hard without losing what made the first movie special. Rather than limiting the story to a single skyscraper, The film turns an entire international airport into a massive battlefield, keeping the suspense intense from beginning to end. Bruce Willis once again delivers a memorable performance as John McClane, portraying him as vulnerable, sarcastic, exhausted, and determined instead of an unstoppable action hero. William Sadler brings a chilling presence to Colonel Stewart through his calm confidence and strict military discipline, while Bonnie Bedelia adds emotional depth and balance as Holly McClane. Combined with thrilling action sequences, realistic tension, and memorable dialogue, these performances help make Die Hard 2 one of the strongest action sequels ever made. Overall, Die Hard 2, 1990, proves that a sequel can raise the stakes while still staying true to everything audiences loved about the original. The film delivers explosive action, unforgettable suspense, emotional character moments, and a powerful reminder that one determined person can make an extraordinary difference when innocent lives are at risk. More than 30 years after its release, Die Hard 2 remains a classic of the action genre and further cements John McClane as one of Hollywood's most iconic action heroes. Its gripping story, memorable performances, and timeless message of courage and perseverance continued to entertain audiences around the world, making it a worthy successor to the legendary original. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this recap, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing movie breakdowns. See you in the next one.